it's Ariane of Sociable Art, and today I'm going to show you how to make a mixed media collage home portrait. And we'll start out by talking about some of the supplies you'll need and make substitutions as needed, but I'll put a whole list in the comments section below of the exact ones I used. I started out with a 10 by 10 cradled wood board, or you could use a canvas instead. And then I have watercolors, scissors, a bonding agent like Mod Podge or Golden Soft Gel, and that's for the collage pieces, an archival black marker, as well as several different other colors of paint markers, some aquarelle colored pencils, some gel sticks and water-soluble oil pastels, and then scraps of paper that I liked from books, magazines, and also some scrapbook paper. And then a printed image of the house that I want to feature in my collage. And so once you gather all those things, you can see what the finished project will look like here. And the first step is to kind of lay out some pieces of cut paper on the board and see if I like how they look. So here's one example. I've just laid the pieces of cut paper and ripped paper and some images that I cut out with scissors and apart from a book, and I just kind of laid them out there. And here's another example of another layout of me just laying the scraps of paper on the wood to see if I like the placement of them. And I will be painting over a lot of this, so just keep that in mind. So here I've laid out some of the scraps of paper. I'm trying to pay attention to the order of which I need to put them onto the wood board, because it's very important to put the one that's underneath on first and then move on from there. And here I am just kind of figuring out where I need to cut this piece of paper so that it'll have a nice clean edge along the side here. So I'm just kind of creasing it with my fingers so that it will have a nice straight line along the edge for the most part. So I crease it, and then I can use my scissors to kind of determine where to cut it. And use some nice sharp scissors for that. And you know, a lot of the time you want to have some torn edges, but along the edges of the board or canvas, I like to have very straight, nice lines. And as I mentioned earlier, I just want to stress it's really important to decide which pieces go on the underneath and then which ones will overlap on top of them in your collage. And you kind of decide that before you start. Otherwise, you might run into a little issue along the way. So here's how I want it to go. And I don't have to worry too much about the other edges on this piece. I don't have to worry about the ripping and everything because that other side will be covered with some of my other pieces, and so you won't see those other edges. So here I've got a piece that I tore out from a children's book, and it's one of the children's books that I used to like to read to my kids. And so it's meaningful to me, and that's why I wanted to include it. I think it's really nice to include, even if in the end you can't read the words, at least you know that it's in there. I think it's nice to include some little nostalgic pieces. And here's another piece of sky that I wanted to include that I also found in a children's book. It's like a watercolor image of a sky. And so I'm just trying to decide how I'm going to place that. And so I ripped the edge and I put it underneath this other piece because I don't really want to cover up too many of the words. And you can see on the text piece, I've got a ripped edge. And here's my house image. I just printed this in black and white right on my printer. I just took an image and I printed it. And I cut it out. I cut out the background with scissors so that it would just sit there in the black and white. I cut out all the trees and everything that were actually there. And here's a piece of green scrapbook paper that I like because it kind of looks like grass, but it's also got a design on it. So I creased it along the edge, and I'm going to cut the edge so that it will fit nicely on there. And I'm just going to place that on top here. And I like the way that that fits. It looks like the grass. And then I have this other similar color green, but it's got some flowers and things on it. And I'm seeing if I can make that fit here. And it's a little bit small. I've still got some of the board showing through, and we definitely don't want to have the board showing through. Oh, and one little note. You'll see that my board is white. That's only because I primed it because I had it was another artwork that I wanted to cover up and reuse the board. So your board will just be probably unprimed not white wood, raw wood, and that's fine. You don't need to do anything to it since you're just going to be gluing paper on top of it. So yours should just be a blank white wood board. So I just found another piece that I want to fit in there. It's the same as the other scrapbook page, but I ripped the edge so that it will have a little interesting ripped area in there. And then I'll also have that one other green piece in there. And I'm just trying to figure out exactly where that will go on my board, since it's going to be on top of the sky piece. I just want to make sure everything fits well before I start gluing things down. And know something about collaging, and that's like, it's that it never turns out exactly the way you want. Something usually, goes wrong at some point, and you can always make it work. So don't worry if you get bubbles in your paper, and you'll see what I mean by that while you're doing it, or anything like that, because you can always kind of cover it up and make it look good. Collage is not an exact science. So now I've got this other piece of scrapbook paper, and I made it so that it fits nicely, and I like the way that it looks. And just be aware that though these are all, these are my scrapbook pieces that go on the underneath of this artwork, there's going to be a whole lot done besides that. We're also going to use all of our other media, like the watercolor and the aquarelle pencils to add more interest to it. So this is just kind of step one. So I just removed all the pieces of scrapbook paper, etc., carefully, one by one, in order of how they will go onto the board. And I kind of place them that way so that I would know which goes first and second, etc. I'm going to speed up the camera in a moment, because all we're going to do is take each piece of scrapbook paper, apply Mod Podge to the back of it, and then apply Mod Podge to the board where it's going to go. And then we're going to very carefully place it on there and make sure to spread it from the center outward to the edges. And you really got to be careful to coat every little bit of that piece of paper, because if you leave any part of it uncoated with the Mod Podge, that's the part where you'll get a bubble. And we really want to try to avoid the bubbles if we can. So cover every single bit of it, especially the edges. And then we also coat the wood just as a precaution to make sure that every single part of that paper is going to be covered. And be careful how you lift it. You're going to have to touch it, but I try to lift it not right on the edge of it, because then you're going to take the glue right off the edge and it'll peel up on the edge. So here I am covering this part here, and then I'll put down that piece of paper. And in a moment, I'm going to speed up the video just a little bit, because all the rest will be me just doing the exact same thing with the other pieces of paper, which is putting the Mod Podge on the piece of paper and then on the wood, and then gluing it in place. And then I'll be back with you to explain some of the other steps after that. And here you can see as I place it down, got to place it correctly. If it doesn't go on right, you can peel it up for the first few seconds or so, and it'll come off very easily. And then spread it out very carefully. I used to use like a brayer, like a roller thing, to do this part, but it kept getting glue on it, and it was just kind of a mess. So I do it now with my hands. Just trying to make sure I completely flatten out, get all the edges down, and keep maybe a little wet rag handy to get the glue off of your fingers. If you push and pull too hard on the paper, you might rip it, which just don't be distressed if you do. You can always glue it back down. But you have to be a little gentle and firm at the same time as you're trying to get it to stick on there. So I've done that piece, and you notice that I had that piece of brown craft paper that I used. That's what I used to do all the gluing on, and it doesn't matter if it gets a little sloppy sometimes, but that works. But here we go, fast time, trying to get all that glued on there, and then I'll talk about the next step. And some of my pieces are ripped, some are cut with scissors. Just depends on how you want it to look. I make it look fast here, don't I? Adding some flowers and some trees. I cut out some bushes out of green paper. And I have a little bluebird on there, bluebird of happiness. So So here I am, I'm just filling in some of the house. I didn't want it to be so stark black and white, so I added a little bit of white paint on there to make it look just a little more finished, and then a lavender color on the roof. And here I am just writing with my black archival pen and doing a little bit of outlining. And then I use the wooden end of my brush to dip into acrylic paint, orange and white, and add little dots on my board. This shows you what my project looked like when I just had the collage papers laid on it, and then after all the embellishments of using the different types of mixed media. And I thought it would be a good idea to kind of show you on a diagram all the different techniques I used and what parts of the artwork. So as you can see here, watercolor was used in some areas because I wanted the background to look more cohesive and add some more colors. And then black aqua color pencil outlining, handwriting with archival marker, white acrylic paint spatter, orange acrylic dotting, white acrylic sponging, and an acrylic wash on the house, and then water soluble pastels. I used those around the outside of the artwork. You can see the orange to frame it, and that just kind of makes it look like it's got a little bit of a frame around the outside. And this is another example of another artwork I did with the same house. So thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you.